Friction. Commander Sarah Chen stood at her apartment window, watching the strange lights descend through San Francisco's foggy evening sky. After 15 years in Earth's Space Defense Force, she thought she'd seen everything. She was wrong. The vessel that emerged from the fog wasn't military. It was a civilian transport, its hull bearing the markings of the Galactic Housing Authority. It settled gracefully into the empty lot next door, its crystalline structure refracting the setting sun into rainbow patterns across the neighborhood. Sarah's combat implants automatically scanned the vessel, old habits dying hard. The readings suggested Arcturian design, a species known for their technological superiority and, unfortunately, their notorious disdain for primitive cultures like Earth's. 3 figures emerged from the transport. They were unmistakably female, their tall, elegant forms covered in iridescent scales that shifted colors with each movement. Their eyes glowed with an inner light, and their long, flowing hair seemed to defy gravity, floating around their heads like liquid silver. "Well," the tallest one said, her voice carrying a musical lilt that barely masked her contempt, "I suppose this is what passes for acceptable housing on this backwater world." She turned to her companions. "Sisters, remember why we're here. The Galactic Council's integration mandate requires at least 1 solar cycle of cohabitation with lesser species." Sarah's enhanced hearing picked up every word. Her jaw tightened, but years of diplomatic training kept her expression neutral. Earth had only recently joined the Galactic Commonwealth, and incidents of alien prejudice was still common. Usually, she let it slide, but these were going to be her neighbors. She stepped out onto her balcony, making sure her commander's insignia was visible on her casual uniform. "Welcome to Earth," she called out, letting a slight edge of authority enter her voice. "I'm Commander Chen. You'll find we're full of surprises." The 3 Arcturians turned, their expressions a mix of surprise and barely concealed disdain. The tallest one spoke first. "I am Lyra, and these are my sisters, Vega and Celeste. We are pleased to make your acquaintance, Commander." Celeste, the youngest-looking sister, consulted a holographic display. "Oh, interesting. It seems our neighbor is one of the few humans with notable achievements." Commander Chen led the defense during the Proxime incident. Sarah noticed a flicker of genuine interest cross Lyra's face. The Proxime incident had been Earth's first major victory against a hostile alien force, proving humans could hold their own in galactic warfare. "That was you?" Vega asked, her tone slightly less dismissive. "We studied that battle at the Academy. The tactical approach was unexpected." "We humans specialize in the unexpected," Sarah replied with a slight smile. "Perhaps during your stay, you'll discover what else we're capable of." Lyra's eyes narrowed. "Indeed, though I doubt your species could truly surprise us. We've seen countless civilizations at your development stage, all following predictable patterns." Sarah's smile didn't waver. "Then this should be an educational experience for everyone involved." She turned to go back inside, then paused. "Oh, and sisters, a word of advice. That superiority complex might work elsewhere in the galaxy, but here on Earth, it tends to lead to interesting outcomes." As she walked back into her apartment, Sarah heard them discussing her in their native tongue, their melodic language carrying tones of both irritation and curiosity. Her implants were already translating, and she caught phrases like unusually confident and potentially problematic. She grinned to herself. If they thought humans were predictable, they were in for quite a shock. Earth had earned its place in the galaxy not through technological advancement, but through sheer determination, adaptability, and what other species often dismissed as primitive unpredictability. The next few months were going to be very interesting indeed. Sarah pulled up her combat training programs on her home holographic system. It had been a while since she'd practiced some of Earth's more primitive martial arts. Something told her she might need them soon, not for fighting, necessarily, but for proving a point. As night fell, she watched the Arcturian sisters settling into their new home, their movements precise and elegant. They were beautiful, yes, But beauty didn't equate to superiority. Earth had taught that lesson to other species before. Sarah's communicator buzzed. A message from Earth Defense Command. Monitor new arrivals. Cultural exchange priority. Maintain diplomatic relations, but don't hesitate to demonstrate human capability if necessary. She sent back a one-word reply, understood. The game was on, and Sarah Chen intended to show these Arcturian sisters exactly why underestimating humanity was always a dangerous mistake. Cultural clashes and hidden agendas. The morning sun cast prismatic reflections off the Arcturian dwelling, creating an ethereal light show across the neighborhood. Sarah Chen finished her morning workout routine, a combination of ancient kung fu and modern combat protocols, when she noticed Lyra observing her from their shared garden space. Fascinating, the Arcturian said, her silver hair rippling in the breeze. You maintain physical exercise despite having access to biological enhancement technology. How charmingly traditional. Sarah toweled off, noting how Lyra's eyes lingered on her well-defined muscles. Some traditions exist for good reasons. Your people's biometric readings suggest you rarely engage in physical activity. Why should we? Lyra stepped closer, her iridescent scales shifting from blue to violet. Our bodies are genetically optimized for peak performance without the need for primitive exertion. And yet, Sarah smiled, I bet you've never experienced the satisfaction of earning that performance. She picked up a training staff. Care to test your optimization against some primitive techniques? Before Lyra could respond, Vega emerged from their dwelling, her attention fixed on a holographic display. Sister, the latest data is concerning. The human's biological readings are far more complex than our initial scans suggested. Of course they are, Celeste appeared, her younger features bright with poorly concealed excitement. I've been analyzing their historical records. Humans have survived multiple extinction-level events, developed spaceflight despite their technological limitations, and even repelled the Proxima invasion using mostly kinetic weapons. Sarah noticed the subtle shift in their dynamics. The sisters were beginning to realize that their predetermined views of humanity might need revision. You know, she offered, I could show you why we value physical training. Your optimization might give you strength, but we've learned there's more to combat than pure power. Laura's pride warred visibly with her curiosity. Very well, Commander. A brief demonstration of your methods. What followed was a lesson in humility. Sarah moved with a grace that belied her primitive training, easily deflecting Lyra's technically perfect but predictable attacks. Each time the Arcturian deployed her enhanced strength, Sarah used it against her, letting momentum and timing do what brute force couldn't. Impossible, Lyra gasped after finding herself on the ground for the third time. Your movements don't follow any known combat algorithms. That's because we don't fight with algorithms, Sarah helped her up, noting how Lyra's scales had flushed a deep purple. We fight with instinct, adaptation, and what you might call primitive unpredictability. Vega's holoscreen was practically smoking from recording data. The implications are significant. If humans can achieve such results through purely biological means, then perhaps, Celeste finished, we've been measuring advancement by the wrong metrics. Later that evening, Sarah received an unexpected visit. Laura stood at her door, her usual aristocratic bearing somewhat diminished. I request further instruction in your combat techniques. Sarah leaned against the doorframe, enjoying the rare sight of an Arcturian struggling with humility. Just combat techniques. Our mission here, Lyra hesitated. It's more than cultural integration. We're part of a genetic diversity study. Recent data suggests that despite our technological advancement, our species is becoming stagnant. We need to understand how humans maintain such biological adaptability. And the best way to understand something, Sarah stepped aside, inviting Lyra in, is to experience it firsthand. The Arcturian scales shifted to a warm gold, a color Sarah had never seen before. Precisely. Over the next few weeks, training sessions became more frequent and more intense. Sarah taught the sisters Earth martial arts, and they shared their knowledge of advanced alien sciences. But something else was developing, an attraction that defied both species' expectations. Sarah noticed how Lyra's touches lingered during combat training, how Vega's scientific curiosity seemed focused increasingly on human physical capabilities, and how Celeste's excitement about human culture had taken on a more personal dimension. The sisters' initial disdain had evolved into fascination, then admiration, and finally something much more complex. Their genetic diversity study was becoming far more intimate than anyone had anticipated. One evening, after a particularly intense training session, Lyra approached Sarah with unusual hesitation. "Our species can adapt to genetic material from compatible races," she said quietly. "It's how we've evolved. But we've never encountered a species like humans before. Your adaptability, your unpredictability, it's not just physical." Sarah understood the unspoken implication. "And your genetic diversity study, is that the only reason you're here?" It was, Lyra admitted, her scales shifting through colors Sarah had never seen before. But now we're discovering that humanity's primitive nature might be exactly what our species needs, both scientifically and personally. As the sun set over San Francisco, casting the Arcturian dwelling in ethereal light, Sarah realized that this cultural exchange was about to become much more significant than either species had planned. The lines between professional duty, scientific study, and personal desire were blurring rapidly. And somewhere in the vast bureaucracy of the Galactic Commonwealth, no one had predicted that the solution to Arcturian genetic stagnation might lie in the very primitive unpredictability they had once dismissed: understanding and intimacy. The autumn fog rolled through San Francisco's streets, wreathing the Arcturian dwelling in ethereal mist. Inside Sarah's apartment, the atmosphere was equally charged with possibility. Lyra sat cross-legged on the floor, her scales shimmering with unprecedented colors as she attempted to meditate, another primitive human practice she'd initially dismissed. "Your heart rate is elevated," Sarah observed, sitting opposite her. "For someone who's genetically optimized, you seem to be struggling with basic emotional control." Lyra's eyes opened, glowing with intensity. "Our optimization focused on eliminating what we considered weakness. Emotion, instinct, primitive drives." She paused, her voice softening. "We never considered they might be strengths." "Sister," Vega called from the doorway, her own scales flickering with unusual patterns. "The latest genetic compatibility scans are complete. The results are extraordinary." Celeste bounded in behind her, practically vibrating with excitement. "Human DNA contains markers we've never seen before. It's not just adaptable, it's actively seeking to evolve. No wonder the Proxima forces couldn't predict your tactics." Sarah stood, offering a hand to Lyra. The simple physical contact sent visible waves of color across the Arcturian's skin. "Evolution isn't just about genetic optimization," Sarah explained. "It's about embracing change, even when it's messy and unpredictable." We're beginning to understand that, Lyra admitted, not releasing Sarah's hand. "Our species' pursuit of perfection led us to a genetic dead end. No variation, no adaptation, no," she struggled with the word, "passion." The room grew quiet as the implications hung in the air. Sarah had noticed the changes in the sisters over the past weeks. Their movements had become less rigid, their interactions more emotional, their interest in human ways more personal than scientific. "Show us," Vega suddenly requested, setting aside her ever-present holoscreen. "Show us how humans embrace imperfection." What followed was unlike anything in either species' historical records. Sarah introduced the sisters to the full spectrum of human experiences, not just the physical training they'd started with, but everything that made humans uniquely adaptable. They cooked real food instead of using molecular synthesizers, the sisters marveling at how the inefficient process created flavors their advanced technology couldn't replicate. They danced to Earth music, their genetically perfect bodies learning to move with human spontaneity. They even tried painting, actual physical paintings, that artwork evolving from technically perfect but soulless reproductions to emotionally charged expressions of their changing perspectives. As weeks passed, the changes became more profound. The sisters' rigid daily routines relaxed. Their dwelling's crystalline architecture began shifting, incorporating organic patterns that reflected their growing appreciation for natural imperfection. Even their speech patterns changed, losing the formal tones of Arcturian nobility in favor of more casual, human expressions. But the most significant changes were happening at a deeper level. The sisters' genetic scans showed increasing compatibility with human DNA, their bodies unconsciously adapting to enable something their species had thought impossible. One evening, as they sat watching the sunset from Sarah's balcony, Laura finally voiced what they'd all been feeling. Our mission was to study human adaptability, to find a way to save our species from genetic stagnation. She turned to Sarah, her scales pulsing with colors that had no name in either language. We never expected to find the answer in what we once called primitive. Genetic diversity studies usually don't involve quite so much personal investment, Sarah noted with a smile, watching how all three sisters' scales flickered in response to her voice. Nothing about humans follows usual patterns, Celeste said, her young face serious for once. Your DNA, your emotions, your ability to adapt, you're everything we engineered out of ourselves in our quest for perfection. Vega set down her holoscreen, a rare occurrence that signaled the gravity of the moment. The preliminary data suggests complete genetic compatibility. More than compatibility, our bodies are actively reconfiguring to optimize integration with human genetic patterns. In less scientific terms, Sarah translated, you're saying evolution has plans of its own. Plans that could save our species, Lara confirmed, moving closer to Sarah. Though I admit, species survival is no longer my primary motivation. The fog thickened around them, creating an intimate cocoon that seemed to separate their balcony from the rest of the world. The sisters' scales had synchronized, pulsing with deep, warm colors that reflected more than just genetic compatibility. Your primitive unpredictability, Lyra whispered, her face inches from Sarah's, is proving far more potent than any engineered perfection. That night marked a turning point, not just for them, but for the future of both species. As boundaries dissolved and barriers fell, none of them fully grasped the magnitude of what they were setting in motion. Their personal exploration of human Arcturian relations was about to have consequences that would reshape galactic society. And somewhere in the depths of their genetically perfect bodies, ancient DNA sequences were awakening, responding to human contact in ways that would soon challenge everything both species thought they knew about evolution. Unexpected consequences. The first sign that something extraordinary was happening came during a routine medical scan. Vega's holoscreen erupted with alerts, its normally pristine display cluttered with unprecedented readings. Her scales shifted to a shocking white, a color of extreme surprise in Arcturian physiology. Sisters, she called out, her usually analytical voice trembling. I believe you should see this. Laura and Celeste rushed to her side, their own scales pulsing with concern. Sarah watched from across the room, noting how all three sisters unconsciously placed their hands over their abdomens. Impossible, Lyra breathed, but the evidence was undeniable. The holoscreen showed 3 distinct genetic matrices, each one a perfect fusion of human and Arcturian DNA. We're pregnant. Celeste's voice mixed wonder with disbelief. All of us. Sarah stepped forward, her military training keeping her voice steady despite the shock. I thought Arcturian reproduction was strictly controlled, engineered in laboratories. It is, Vega confirmed, her scientific demeanor cracking as she stared at the readings. Or it was. Our bodies have somehow bypassed centuries of genetic programming. These embryos are developing naturally. More than naturally, Lyra added, her scales shifting through colors never before seen in their species. They're evolving in real time. The human DNA isn't just combining with ours, It's enhancing it, unlocking genetic potential we didn't know we had. The implications hit them all at once. This wasn't just about their personal relationships anymore. They had inadvertently initiated something that would change both species forever. Sarah's communicator buzzed. Earth Defense Command had detected the unusual genetic signatures. At the same time, the sisters' dwelling received a priority transmission from the Arcturian High Council. They're going to want to study this, Sarah said quietly. Both sides. Laura's scales darkened with determination. We are not experiments. Neither are our children. The genetic implications alone are staggering, Vega murmured, still scanning the data. These embryos show signs of both human adaptability and Arcturian advancement. They're literally perfect hybrids. Celeste, the youngest and often most insightful, looked up from the readings. Perhaps that's exactly what both our species need. Not perfection through engineering, but evolution through union. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Medical specialists from both species arrived, each amazed by what they found. The pregnancies were progressing at an accelerated rate, the hybrid embryos developing with unprecedented vigor. Your primitive reproductive methods, one Arcturian scientist remarked with poorly concealed envy, have achieved what centuries of genetic engineering could not. Sarah found herself in the unusual position of both partner and protector. Earth Defense Command, recognizing the diplomatic implications, had assigned her as official liaison to the Arcturian families. It was a convenient cover that allowed her to stay close to the sisters. Late one night, as they sat in their now shared living space, Laura voiced what they'd all been thinking. Our children will be something entirely new. Neither human nor Arcturian, but something more. They'll be beautiful, Sarah assured her, watching how the moonlight played across Laura's scales, and probably impossible to predict. Like their human parent, Celeste teased, her scales glowing with warmth. Vega, ever the scientist, was reviewing the latest scans. The genetic combination is fascinating. Human adaptability and emotional capacity merged with Arcturian physical capabilities and intellectual advancement. But there's something more. The children are showing signs of abilities we've never seen before, Lara explained to Sarah, as if the combination of our DNA has unlocked evolutionary potential dormant in both species. The implications weren't lost on anyone. These pregnancies weren't just a biological curiosity, they represented a potential evolutionary leap forward for both humans and Arcturians. Word spread quickly through the galactic community. Other species, many facing their own genetic stagnation, watched with intense interest. The once dismissed primitive, humans had proven that their unpredictable nature might be the key to unlocking new evolutionary paths. But with attention came risk. Not everyone would welcome such dramatic change. Sarah caught glimpses of unmarked vessels in orbit, monitoring their location. Both human and Arcturian conservative factions were expressing concerns about the implications of hybrid offspring. We'll protect them, Sarah promised, her combat implants automatically scanning for threats. All of them. We know, Lara replied, her scales rippling with trust and affection. That's one of the many things we've learned about humans. Your primitive protective instincts are far more reliable than any engineered loyalty protocols. As night fell over San Francisco, the sisters' dwelling had begun to adapt to their changing needs, its crystalline structure incorporating more organic, Earth-like elements. It was a physical manifestation of what was happening to its inhabitants, a perfect blend of advanced technology and natural evolution. Inside, 3 former advocates of genetic perfection found themselves embracing the beautiful unpredictability of natural life, while their human partner discovered that sometimes the most advanced step forward was a return to nature's own wisdom. Their children would be born into a galaxy on the brink of change, carrying in their hybrid DNA the potential to bridge the gap between technological perfection and evolutionary adaptability. The question wasn't just how they would change their species, but how their very existence would reshape galactic society's understanding of advancement itself. Galactic implications. The Arcturian High Council's emergency session was being broadcast across every major system in the Commonwealth. On a secure holoscreen in their home, Sarah and the sisters watched as millennia of carefully maintained genetic philosophy began to crumble. The implications are undeniable. The High Councillor's image flickered with barely controlled agitation. These hybrid pregnancies represent the first successful natural reproduction in Arcturian history in over 10,000 years. The sisters' dwelling had become a fortress of sorts. Earth Defense Command ships maintained a discreet perimeter in orbit, while Arcturian security vessels hovered at the edges of the solar system. The pregnancies, now in their 5th month, progressing at an unprecedented rate, had become the most discussed scientific event in recent galactic history. "Look at these readings," Vega said, displaying her latest scans. The embryo's development patterns defied both human and Arcturian norms. Their neural patterns show signs of both telepathic potential and human emotional depth. The physical structures combine our enhanced capabilities with human adaptability. "And that's exactly why certain factions are terrified," Sarah noted, her combat implants detecting another stealth probe attempting to scan their home. She disabled it with a thought. "You're proving that natural evolution might be superior to engineered perfection." Lyra, her abdomen now visibly swollen, placed a hand over her growing child. Her scales had developed new patterns that seemed to flow like liquid starlight. "Our bodies are changing too. The pregnancies are awakening genetic potential we didn't know we had." "It's not just physical," Celeste added, her young face serious. "I feel more. The emotional range humans take for granted. We were taught it was primitive, but it's like awakening parts of ourselves that were deliberately suppressed." The holoscreen flared with new alerts. Other species were beginning to report similar phenomena. In systems where humans and advanced races had begun to intermingle, subtle genetic changes were being observed. The very presence of human DNA seemed to act as a catalyst, awakening dormant evolutionary paths. "The Galactic Commonwealth is divided," Sarah reported, reviewing the latest intelligence. "Some see this as the next step in evolution. Others view it as a threat to genetic purity. And Earth," she paused, "Earth is suddenly finding itself at the center of galactic politics." A soft chime interrupted them. Another medical scan was complete. Vega's eyes widened as she reviewed the data. "The children, they're already developing consciousness. Their brains show activity patterns that suggest they're aware and communicating." "With each other?" Sarah asked. "With everyone," Lyra whispered, her scales pulsing with new colors. "They're reaching out telepathically, but not like our species' limited empathic abilities. It's something new, something human and Arcturian and more," Celeste finished. "They're showing us what's possible when we stop trying to control evolution and let it happen naturally." Outside, the fog had taken on an unusual iridescence, responding to the unique energy signatures emanating from their home. The dwelling itself had continued to evolve, its crystalline structure now incorporating biological elements that grew and adapted like living tissue. But not all the changes were welcome. Reports were coming in of protests on both Earth and Arcturia. Conservative factions warned of genetic contamination, of the loss of species purity, of the dangers of uncontrolled evolution. "They don't understand," Vega said, her scientific detachment cracking as she felt her child's consciousness brush against her mind. "This isn't contamination, it's completion. Our species engineered away parts of ourselves that we're only now realizing we needed." "And humans," Lyra added, reaching for Sarah's hand, "kept those parts alive. Your so-called primitive nature preserved what we nearly lost forever." Alert flashed across their security screens. A joint delegation from Earth Defense Command and the Arcturian High Council was requesting permission to land. They wanted to study the pregnancies firsthand. "No," all three sisters said simultaneously, their scales synchronized in a display of unity. "Our children aren't going to be research subjects," Lyra declared, her voice carrying new authority. They're going to be the first of something new, something both our species need to become. Sarah activated her combat protocols, ready to defend her family if necessary. But the sisters had another idea. "Let them come," Celeste suggested, a mysterious smile playing across her face. "Let them feel what we feel. Let them experience firsthand what happens when you stop fighting evolution and embrace it instead." The children, growing rapidly in their mother's wombs, seemed to respond to this. A wave of consciousness swept through the room, touching minds and awakening dormant potential. It wasn't just the sisters who were changing. Sarah felt it too, her own DNA responding to the hybrid influence. They were all evolving together, becoming something that neither species had imagined possible. The question wasn't whether the galaxy was ready for this change, but whether they could prevent it even if they tried. As the delegation's ships began their descent through San Francisco's glowing fog, Sarah and the sisters prepared to show the galaxy that the future wouldn't be found in genetic engineering or primitive preservation, but in the beautiful unpredictability of natural evolution itself. The children they carried were just the beginning. The first wave of a change that would reshape not just their species, but the very definition of advancement in the galaxy. New beginnings. The birth of the first human-Arcturian hybrids wasn't marked by medical machinery or clinical observation. Instead, it came with a pulse of energy that temporarily disrupted every electronic device in the San Francisco Bay Area. The fog glowed with bioluminescence, and for a brief moment, every sentient being within a 100-mile radius felt the touch of new consciousness. "They're beautiful," Sarah whispered, cradling the first of the newborns. The child's skin shifted between human tones and Arcturian scales, creating patterns that seemed to reflect the very fabric of space itself. Most striking were the eyes. Holding both human depth and Arcturian luminescence, they seemed to contain galaxies. All three births happened within hours of each other. Each child was unique, yet they moved in perfect synchronization, that infant consciousness already linked in ways that defied both human and Arcturian understanding. Their genetic structure, Vega observed, her scientific nature temporarily overwhelming maternal awe, it's still evolving. They're not just hybrids, they're a completely new species, one that can adapt and change at will. The children proved this minutes later when they began instinctively shifting their physical forms, adapting to better bond with each parent. With Sarah, they showed more human characteristics. With their Arcturian mothers, their scales brightened and shifted. Perfect adaptation, Lyra breathed, watching her child morph effortlessly. Not through engineering, but through natural ability. The joint delegation from Earth and Arcturia, still waiting outside their dwelling, had recorded everything. The data was already spreading across the galaxy, causing a fundamental shift in how species viewed evolution and advancement. The conservative factions are silent, Sarah noted, checking her updates. Hard to argue against perfection when it develops naturally. But the most profound changes were happening within their home. The sisters, through their pregnancies and now motherhood, had evolved far beyond their original Arcturian limitations. Their scales now displayed colors previously impossible for their species, their telepathic abilities had grown exponentially, and most importantly, their emotional capacity had blossomed. "We thought we had achieved perfection through control," Celeste said, tears, another new ability, rolling down her luminescent cheeks. "But true perfection comes through embracing change." The children grew at an accelerated rate, reaching developmental milestones hourly instead of monthly. By sunset, they were already communicating, not just with their parents, but with each other and the world around them. Their consciousness touched the minds of humans and aliens alike, sharing a vision of unity that transcended species barriers. "They're showing us the way forward," Sarah realized, watching as her children effortlessly bridged the gap between organic and technological advancement. Not through engineering or primitiveness, but through harmony. The galactic commonwealth was transformed. Other species, inspired by the success of human Arcturian hybridization, began to reconsider their own paths to advancement. The human capacity for adaptation once dismissed as primitive, was now recognized as the key to unlocking evolutionary potential. 1 month after the births, the Arcturian High Council made an unprecedented announcement. They would abandon their program of engineered perfection in favor of natural evolution. Earth, in turn, was elevated to a principal member of the Galactic Commonwealth, recognized for preserving the crucial elements of natural development that other species had engineered away. But for Sarah and the sisters, galactic politics meant little compared to the joy of watching their children grow. The hybrid offspring continued to develop in ways that amazed both species, displaying abilities that combined the best of both worlds while evolving into something entirely new. "They are the future," Lara said one evening, as they watched their children manipulating energy fields with the same ease that human children played with toys. Not just of our species, but of all species. The children had begun teaching others their unique consciousness, allowing them to share knowledge and abilities across species barriers. Humans gained access to advanced genetic potential, while engineered species rediscovered their capacity for natural evolution. Their home had become a nexus of transformation. The crystalline dwelling had fully merged with Earth's environment, creating a living structure that adapted to its inhabitants' needs. It stood as a symbol of what was possible when advancement and nature worked in harmony. "We came here believing we would study primitive humans," Vega mused, watching her child create complex mathematical models in midair. Instead, we learned that what we called primitive was actually the most advanced force in the galaxy, the power of natural evolution. Sarah smiled, feeling the touch of her children's minds against her own. Sometimes the best way forward is to remember where you came from. As night fell over San Francisco, the fog once again took on the bioluminescent glow that had become common since the births. But now it was joined by similar phenomena around the globe, wherever humans and aliens had begun to follow the path first walked by Sarah and the sisters. Their story, which began with condescension and prejudice, had evolved into something that would reshape the galaxy. The children they created were living proof that the future belonged not to those who sought to control evolution, but to those who embraced its beautiful unpredictability. And somewhere in the vast expanse of space, countless species looked toward Earth with new understanding, finally recognizing that true advancement lay not in engineering perfection, but in the wonderful chaos of natural evolution and the unlimited potential of love that transcended all species barriers. The age of engineered perfection was over. The era of endless possibility had begun.